Congressman Mark Takano is one of the first openly, or is the first openly gay person of color in Congress. He's also a sponsor of the Equality Act, which is now in Congress. He represents Riverside. Congressman Takano, good to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you again and be in the studio.
Yeah, first time in the studio. We love having you here.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your story. You've been very open about the fact that you were outed as a gay man in the 1990s when the politics of that were not great. Talk to us about your experience with that and the guy who did that to you.
Well, it was, I very nearly became a member of Congress in 1992, but for 500 votes. I was ahead on election night by 1,200 votes, but the late arriving absentee ballots put me behind. My sexuality was not an issue in 1992, but I was certainly viewed as a threat by the member of Congress who won. My opponent was then Ken Calvert. I was encouraged to run again in 1994. Obviously, the Democratic Party leaders really encouraged me to do that. In 1994, people were very concerned that I was not really viewed as a known quantity back in 1992, but my 1992 performance really I think
scared them, so they were worried about it, and so they wanted to damage you.
It was a notorious race, and so one of the things I was outed, a notorious mailer that said it was in pink and lavender colors, asked whether I would be a member of Congress for Riverside, or you opened up the mailer, it said San Francisco, and on the back it said, he supports the radical agenda of the homosexual human rights campaign. Which was, over the top.
So you lost that race because of that, but then years later, when attitudes changed a little bit, you got back and you were able to win decisively.
Well, Alex, it may have been that in 1994, being openly Democrat was a bigger issue than being...
It's a bad year in the middle of the Clinton administration, and it was a big wipeout, but yeah.
The fact is, 18 years later, I lost that race in 1994 by 18 points. 18 years later, I would win on my third try by 19 points.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Ken Calvert, the Congress member who did that, is now running against an openly gay man, and now Palm Springs is part of his district, one of the most gay areas in the state. So we'll see what happens to him.
Will Rollins is hopefully, from my point of view, will be my neighboring member of Congress. Yeah. I have worked with Ken on some things, but I obviously have disagreements.
Okay, so let's talk about something that you're pushing in Congress right now, which is called the Equality Act.
Yes.
What does that do, real simply, and what's the status of it?
Well, real simply, it codifies into law very basic protections for people who are LGBTQ. We very simply open up the 1964 Civil Rights Act and include gender identity and sexual orientation as protected classes of people. And what will that mean? That you're protected in housing, you're protected in the workplace from discrimination, you're protected in financial services with credit, education, any government-funded programs, you cannot discriminate against an LGBTQ person, juries. I might be leaving something out, but it basically makes sure that all across the land we recognize LGBTQ people as full citizens.
Do you have the votes for that?
In the House of Representatives, we've passed it twice. I do believe that if we didn't have the filibuster in the Senate, it would pass by majority vote in the Senate as well. There's widespread support generally among Americans. Americans generally believe in equality before the law. They do.
Yeah, and we'll see, because the filibuster is an issue in the Senate going forward in this next election. So there was an executive action today that President Biden took on immigration, which is basically for about 500,000 spouses of U.S. citizens or children of U.S. citizens. They're undocumented. Their spouse is a citizen. They're now going to have more protected legal status. Critics say this is just going to incentivize more illegal immigration. What say you?
Well, what I believe is that this executive order applies to spouses, undocumented spouses of American citizens who've been here for at least 10 years. And they've been often working and being productive. And we know that the undocumented children, they're a class of dreamers. And Americans are very sympathetic to the kids who are undocumented in this country. And, you know, another part of that is that the executive order does include include a provision for Dreamers to expedite their paperwork. If they have graduated with a degree and have a job offer, they're going to get work papers. It makes no sense that we would not be, you know, having people who have something to contribute to our country make that contribution.
Sounds like, I mean, you're obviously for it and think it's a good thing.
I think it's historic.
Yeah.
I think it's historic. I think on balance, most Americans will support this. I know that some Americans have very strong feelings about this, but I do believe that this is a humane thing to do and it's the right thing to do.
Congressman, great to see you.
Great seeing you.
Happy Pride Month.
Thank you.
Thank you.